Hello, clever people, and welcome to my review for the Thor Trilogy. So the second part of my MCU marathon leading up to Avengers Endgame, the second stop is at the Thor Trilogy, which is comprised of 3 movies: Thor, which came out in 2010, Thor the Dark World, which came out in 2013, and Thor Ragnarok, which came out in 2017. The Thor trilogy has never really been one of the trilogies that I've preferred in the MCU. I've always much preferred other trilogies. I've always preferred other characters, honestly. It's weird to me that usually quality of movie correlates to how I like the characters or how I don't like the characters. One of my favorite characters is Ant-Man, because I love the movies that Ant-Man are in. Another one of my favorite characters in the MCU is Star-Lord, because both of the Guardians of the Galaxy movies are some of my favorite movies. Another one of my favorites, Captain America. All 3 of his films I like. But the 3 Thor movies, I don't really like any of them, and Thor also hasn't ever really been a hero that I like. And that's because I don't think that these movies present him in a very good way. I don't think that his arc in any of the movies is really notable or anything worth noting about. I mean, there's nothing in his arc. He feels like the same character throughout most of the movies that he goes through, especially the first and second one. He feels like virtually the same character. I barely see any change in him. The only thing that changes is that he becomes less greedy, but it's not really a big character trait for him, so there's not a whole lot for me to get emotionally attached to. Those are some general thoughts on the trilogy, but specifically I will go through each movie of the 3 and I will say things specifically that I like about them and I don't like about them. So the first movie is Thor. So Thor came out back in 2010, back in phase 1 when they were ramping things up, getting ready for the Avengers, and it follows the story of Thor Odenheim, who is about to be deemed the king of Asgard, but then something goes awry. He doesn't quite know what it is, or I think that he might know what it is, and he has to go and try to fix it, but in doing so he ends up on Earth and he can't get back to Asgard. And while he is stuck on Earth, Loki, his brother who has always been jealous, tries to take over. Thor has been one of my least favorite Marvel movies for as long as I can remember. I was bored to tears with this movie when I was a kid, and honestly, I don't think that it's gotten much better. I think that being older, I can be entertained by it a little bit more, because my problem with it when I was younger was not enough action. There's just a lot of talking, not enough action. Now listening to the dialogue in this movie, it's just not very good. It's written at a fast pace so that it keeps you entertained, but it's just not very well written, so I don't know, I just kind of got bored of it, and it's not the same type of bored I was when I was younger. It's a different type of boring, but in the end it is still boring. There's not a whole lot about Thor that's very special. There's nothing bright about it. It's a very gray, very dull hodgepodge of a bunch of ideas. It's linear, obviously. I mean, it's a competently made movie. It doesn't look that bad. The acting isn't that bad. There's not a whole lot of problems with it. It's just personally, I was not interested in watching it. I felt temptations to go on my phone while watching it because there just wasn't a whole lot that was bringing me to it. And another big problem was that the chemistry between Jane and Thor was not very strong at all. That is the worst couple in MCU history. I'm sorry, but that's just true. They are terrible together, and this was the first time they were together, and still things just did not click. So for all of those reasons, I will give Thor a 3.75 out of 10. Alright, next up is Thor the Dark World, and unfortunately the Thor films did not get much better. The thing about Thor is that even though it was boring, and even though not a whole lot was happening that really kept me there, I still was interested enough in who Thor was and learning about him as a character. But the problem with Thor the Dark World is that he feels like the same character he was at the beginning of Thor, and this time there's not the curiosity about who he is and learning about him. There's no more world building. It's just what's left is just Thor basically doing a lot of the same things from the first one. I mean, it's another group of aliens that are trying to fight him, and he has to go back to Earth, and he sees Jane again, and Jane and him again have terrible chemistry. And honestly, it just felt like it was the same as the last one. And obviously it wasn't. There were some different things. Loki was a more defined character, so it was more entertaining to watch him. And the struggle between Thor and Loki actually became a lot better in the second one. But besides that, there's not a whole lot that's different. And seeing the same thing as the first one and the mistakes they made in the first being made again, and even to a worse extent, not a good thing. Thor: The Dark World is probably my least favorite MCU movie. I will give Thor: The Dark World a 3.25 out of 10. Alright, now we are on to Thor Ragnarok. So, this one follows the story. It's a very different story. It's Thor, and he is confronted by this woman who he learns is his, well, I won't spoil that, but he's confronted by this woman named Helena, I believe, who is trying to take over Asgard. And while doing so, she banishes Thor to a faraway world where he has to fight up the ranks and try to get back to Asgard to save it before she completely destroys it and turns it into something it shouldn't be. So Thor Ragnarok is a movie I feel weird about because when I first saw it, I didn't like it much. I thought it was okay. I thought it was a step in the right direction with Thor, giving him more variety and making him a more interesting character. However, I still didn't like it. However, watching it again, I can say that I liked this movie more this time. What I think happened the first time was that I went in with expectations that we were getting a Taika Waititi movie, who is the director, who makes very absurd, very art house movies. Obviously, we aren't going to get something from that when it's Marvel. So, understanding that this time going in, I liked Thor Ragnarok a heck of a lot more. This movie is entertaining. It's well written. It's very, very well written, actually. I think the dialogue is partially what stands out about it so much. And there's enough funny moments throughout. There's enough tiny little moments in every single scene to keep the movie consistently entertaining. My problem with it is that sometimes it has a problem balancing the humor and balancing the seriousness, and sometimes the two clash and they don't really work. Still, I think that Thor: The Dark World was a step in the right direction. It gave Thor a more defined arc. You did see him be a different person from the beginning of the movie to the end. Even though at the beginning of the movie he still felt like the same character from the first Thor, by the end of the movie he feels like a different person. So it was nice to see arc, it was nice to see well-written dialogue, it was nice to see quippy remarks that even though they may have distracted from the movie, I still think that they worked. And in the end, I did enjoy Thor Ragnarok. I will give Thor Ragnarok a 7 out of 10. Alright, that concludes my review for the Thor trilogy. So, what are your thoughts on this trilogy, or how would you rank them? Comment in the comments section below and let me know. I'm Robert Burke, and this has been The Clever Critics. Goodbye.